Hey there, listeners. I am Joanne Lee Cornish, your truth bomb dropper in the world of weight loss, body composition, and mastering the art of rocking the body you've always deserved and dreamed of in midlife and beyond. Let's cut through the noise. Society tells us it's downhill from now on. We're told to embrace the middle-aged weight gain, embrace the muscle loss and poor health. If that's your vibe, then cool. But if you're ready to defy the narrative, then I am your gal. This podcast is a no fluff podcast where we break down the essential truths of body composition, toss around some practical tips, and dissect the latest trends. I'm not here to sugarcoat. I'm here to show you what's not just possible, but downright probable for you. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to click the link in the show notes to explore how we can team up and kick mediocrity to the curb. I offer one-on-one coaching, my ever-popular group coaching programs, and my corporate Educate to Elevate program. Okay, let's get on with the podcast. Enjoy. Commodities versus consumer packaged goods. So we can see that our food choices are massively swayed by what is on the shelves, what's available, food preferences, and by the advertising that we are exposed to. So it's worth noting here that some really great foods that benefit us hugely are at a major disadvantage because of the designations commodities and consumer packaged goods. So a commodity is something in its raw state. So it would be the meat, it would be eggs, things like that. Whereas consumer packaged goods, these are your processed foods. So it's your, cereal to pizza, whatever it is. The big difference here is, excuse me, is the commodities fall under the jurisdiction of the USDA, whereas the processed foods are under the jurisdiction, of the FTC. Now, that's Federal Trade Commission. The reason this is important, an important difference to note, is because under those designations, what they are allowed to do. So commodities, again, these are the raw materials, the raw products, they cannot compare themselves to other foods. They can't cite themselves as being better in quality, or they can't, cite a difference in them compared to something else. Like the meat industry can't say, hey, my steak is better than your beans. Can't do that, right? Not allowed to do that. Whereas the processed food under the FTC, which is not regulated by the USDA, is allowed to make such claims. So that they can't claim that the product will cure a disease. That there's definitely restriction there, but they can make broad claims, including claims against commodities. So they can say things like, meat is going to kill you, or eggs are bad for you. But then they can say, oh, but our cereal is heart healthy. You see what I'm saying? So the commodity, the raw material, can't make any of these claims. They can't say, hey, egg is a better protein than the Impossible Burger. They're not allowed to say that. But the Impossible Burger, the plant-based burger, can say something like, I don't know what it says because I've never bought one, but it could say something like, meat is bad for you, plant-based rules, or something like that. Plant-based is heart healthy, or something like that. They're allowed to make claims like that. So the commodity industry really is somewhat silenced. And that's a problem because our purchasing behavior is very much governed, especially those that are not educated like this, is very much governed by what we are exposed to, what information we're exposed to, what claims we're exposed to, packaging, labeling, advertising. So when you get the raw materials in the commodity industry that aren't allowed to say anything, they're not allowed to stick up for themselves. If somebody makes a claim against them, say, the packaged food industry says, eggs are bad. The egg industry isn't allowed to come back and say, actually, eggs are really good and we're better than you because XYZ. They're not allowed to do that. But the processed food is allowed to make comparisons and some amount of claim. This is a problem. When we look at our purchasing behavior, they spend a lot of advertising because it works. When we talk about exposure and billboards and advertising and influencers and all this, it matters the verbiage that we get. And some really great, high quality, unprocessed, natural foods are silenced because of the organization that they're controlled by, the USDA. When it comes to food preferences, and I think I already did a podcast on this. If not, it's fascinating. I'll do one. When it comes to food preferences, you often find people shy away from healthy foods or dieting foods because they'll say, oh, I don't like that. I don't like salad. I don't like this. I don't like that. That's simply a food preference. And food preferences are simply a matter of exposure. So you can totally shift a food preference just by being more exposed to the thing that you want to like. So say that I don't like salads. I don't like vegetables. That's a good one. I don't like vegetables. And then, for a few days, you force yourself to eat vegetables. Suddenly you get a taste for them. My husband, Kevin, perfect example. Now all he wants is green beans. He wouldn't eat a green bean years ago, but now he loves them because he was kind of forced, but he was exposed to them continually during my peak week program. And now he loves them and now he asks for them. That food preference wouldn't have changed unless he'd been exposed to it. So my point bringing this all together is when you have natural foods in their natural state that have huge health benefits, they're not allowed to tell you. Whereas you get the packaged food industry, which has, and here's another thing. So you've got the commodity industry. Here I go again, getting worked up. You've got the commodities. So not only are they not allowed to say anything because they're under the USDA, but they don't really have the money to say anything. They don't have some massive advertising campaign to exploit. They don't have that financial backing to use in food claims, even if they're allowed to do it. Whereas you get the packaged food, the processed food and the packaged food, for one, they can go shout the mouth off, making comparisons which aren't necessarily true. Commodities can't even defend themselves, making claims that are persuasive, let's say. Plus, they have the money to back up this form of advertising and exposure. It's a problem, guys. We are influenced by the advertising, but we are also, once they get that food down our gullet, then a lot of us will become hooked. We get a preference. We get a what's the word I'm looking for? What is the word I'm looking for? We like the food and we want more of it. What's the word I'm looking for? And so we have more of it and more of it. And all of a sudden, I like these and I don't like that. Well, you were just overexposed to it. And you were overexposed to it because the advertising, it's on the shelves, it's right in front of you. The packaged food wins. What we have seen lately is we all know that, eggs are bad, eggs are bad, eggs are bad. The egg industry didn't tell you that, right? The egg industry certainly didn't tell you that. The Heart Association has something to do, has definitely is culpable in that. But the egg industry couldn't turn around and say, excuse me, no, I'm not. No, I'm actually not. The meat industry, look at what's going on right now. Meat has been pretty much ignored, so we've been arguing about fat and we've been arguing about carbs, and meat kind of got left, protein kind of got left on the sideline, but now it's getting roped in. And now what you're saying, oh, meat is bad, meat is going to kill you, meat is, carcinogenic, and oh, you've got to eat plant-based, plant-based, plant-based. Why? Because plant-based is processed. And the poor little meat industry can't do a dang thing about it. They can't be like, well, actually, there's never been a study on poultry that has proved what you're talking about. The studies that you're talking about have all been based on processed meat and burnt meat. That's a whole other thing. So the studies that have shown that meat is bad, there was burnt meat. And, all you have to do, guys, if you want to totally eliminate that risk, is marinate your meat, especially in rosemary. Apparently that works really well. But anyway, it's a different podcast. Burnt meat and processed meat, that's where the studies came from. It never came from a lean cut of steak. It never came from organic chicken breast. It didn't come from fish, wild caught fish. But they can't say anything. They can't stand up for themselves. Meanwhile, the Impossible Burger and whatever the other one is can say, plants are better, plants are this, we're comparable. No, they're not. No, they're not. In my coaching, I try not to ever coach from a bias. I try and coach from a point of what the body actually does. Not from the bias, because every decade or so we get a different bias. So right now there's a plant food bias going on. Everyone's got to be plant-based, plant-based. No argument for me. Everybody should be eating more plants. No argument for me. At the exclusion of animal protein, not unless it's your belief for other reasons. But no, you can't say they're comparable. So what I'm saying is there's a bias. Well, the bias of the decade doesn't actually alter what your body actually does with macronutrients, right? Or when we were, keto. Okay, I have no problem with keto, except not many people actually do it. And 30% of people, that amount of saturated fat does not work for them. But again, there was a big wave of popularity. So there was a bias, and a lot of people were coaching from that place of bias. I try and ultimately only ever coach from a point of what we know right now with regards to nutrition, health, and body composition. So personally, I don't eat red meat. I haven't ate red meat since I can't even tell you when. It was definitely in England. So I'm going to guess I was a teenager. I don't know why I stopped. It repulses me. I'm probably a hypocrite. It looks too much like an animal. That looks too much like blood. I don't know. But I haven't ate it for a long time. But am I going to use my bias and tell you, don't eat red meat. Don't eat red meat. Oh, you shouldn't do that. You should stick with poultry and fish. No, because that's my bias. That's not what the body actually, that information is not instructed by the body, is it? That's just a bias. So separate yourselves from preferences. Don't be held back by preferences. If you think, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, that's simply a matter of exposure. Once you are more exposed to something, you end up liking it. It's nearly always the case. And I will look, but if I haven't done a podcast on that, that's super, super fascinating. I'll do one. So first of all, don't be limited by food preferences. 2, don't be influenced by the advertising and the verbiage, because it's very weighted discussion, that benefits the processed food industry. And thirdly, don't be swayed by the bias of the moment. Only ever look at what the body actually does with food. And we know that pretty well by now. Anyway, I thought that was super interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. I think the next podcast should actually be on the fear of protein, because I've got some really interesting stuff on that, where all this fear-based information came with regards to protein, and let me burst that bubble. But for now, that is the Midlife Mayhem podcast. I do hope you enjoy it. I've got coaching coming up. I've got my Muscle Month program coming up the end of next week on March the 31st. If you're listening to this and you missed it, sorry. It's a great program. But musclemonth.com, go check it out.